Soldier, born on the Rosebud Reservation, is a founding member of the Oak Lake Tribal Writers Society, a graduate of Sinte Gleska University and Pennsylvania State University. She is best known for her poetry, but is also a nonfiction writer, teacher, business owner, and native craftswoman. Whirlwind Soldier received the 2015 South Dakota Living Indian Treasure Award in recognition of her preservation of traditional art forms. It's my pleasure to introduce Lydia Whirlwind Soldier.
I hope you can all hear me. Can you hear me? Okay. I wrote this collection of poetry, survival songs, and I have two poetry books out. One is memory songs and then survival songs. And the reason the word songs is in my title is because I couldn't find the word for, Lakota word for poetry. I asked different elders, what's our word for poetry? You know, went around asking different people, thinking maybe somebody knew, but everybody said, we don't have a word for poetry. Our poetry is in our songs. And so after that, listening carefully to ceremonial songs, I realized that it is poetry and it's beautiful. This collection of poetry I dedicated to my own community, my own Teoshpai, my extended family. And they were known as the Bad Nation because I guess when they first came onto the reservation, the BIA superintendent said, get these troublemakers as far away from the agency as possible because we were considered hostile. So, but, you know, we kind of took pride in it, not, you know, giving in and not succumbing to everything that was happened to us. And I listed all the names of, I couldn't remember the names of our people there. I couldn't, but my brother and I at one time was, when we were little, we knew all the old people by their Lakota names. So my brother and I sat down one time and we recorded all these names. And so this is what I wrote in English. It's not in Lakota. Okay, and most of this poetry is about boarding schools because I grew up in boarding schools. I was 4 years old when the BIA came and took me away from my mom and dad and my grandparents and took me to a boarding school. And they took us to boarding schools where there was room. And the only place that had room for us was at St. Francis. It was a Catholic boarding school. So that's where BIA took us. The first poem I'm going to read is Voices in the Wind. I've heard those voices so soft and full, words spoken and left in the wind. I feel them in the blue of sky and breathe them in. Maybe they were left in a passing storm or in the silence of the frost left behind. Maybe if I listen, those words soft and distant will call again in the cricket songs or in the long shadow making sun, in the leaf-littered path or in the Sundance tree, ragged bark. Maybe if I listen, those words will come again in the night waves, in the wide open spaces of prairie, in the blue horizon, or in the fraying thunder clouds. Maybe my words will comfort the ghosts, rise up in currents magnified with the light of dawn, in the sparkle of snow, in the moon of popping trees. Stories do not die when left in the wind. Maybe if I speak softly, my words will be remembered by the wind. My mother was, after 1969, we had the Religious Freedom Act was passed for the Native Americans. Before then, we could not practice our religion. We don't really call it a religion, we call it Lako Wicho Un, it means the Lakota way of life. So we don't we don't really consider it a religion. But after 1969, we were able to practice our religion openly, our way of life openly. And the first Sundance, my mom was one. There was only 6 people who danced on our reservation. And my mom was one of them. And there was 4 women and 2 men. And so they were called the Sundance Mothers because they were the first to actually practice publicly. So I wrote this for her, Sundance Mother. Her dreams were caught in the turbulence and tossed aside, cast into shadows and ominous places, carved and shaped by violent storms, a world of renunciation, the pain heavy and narrow on her shoulders, sad faces and stained glass windows, stations of the cross corrupted, swallowed by a malignant whirl of confessions and golden angels, battered, held captive like a butterfly pinned to symbols of illusionary good. She slipped into silence and cloudy memory. Years stretched before her. She wandered adrift, taunted death, searched for safe resting places. Sunbeams summoned strength. Through the darkened paths and swamps of self-doubt and fear, she found what remained brilliant and clear. She escaped to soar on silk wings of sunrise and sunset colors, to return in triumph to the truth of a Sundance mother. So that was my mom. I marked all these. I wanted to read. Winter Chaser is my next poem. My brother was a counselor, and he worked at the BIA hospital, and he counseled women people who had deaths in the family, and there was an older man dying, and his name was Winter Chaser. And so my brother would go up and visit him and just sit with him. Some evenings he'd sit there for 2 or 3 hours just to comfort him because he was dying. And so I wrote this poem for him. It seems kind of he was called the Winter Chaser since he was a little boy because he loved the snow. He loved to play in the snow. He'd go just enjoy the snow. So they called him Winter Chaser. His voice reached deep, joy and strength in his name. Winter Chaser, voyager in winter places, in his own deepest being, repeating his name. Ma, wana iwankietro lila dayan wahi. When the winter came, he would say this, so glad to see the snow. Rise up one more time before you lay down beneath the blanket of snow. Stare out into the July sun at the towering mushroom thunderheads. Winter Chaser, find the comfort of snow. The warrior sends zigzag, crackling arrows from his bow. Whisper softly, Winter Chaser. The listening sky sends ragged, dark cloud curtains and streamers of snow. Whisper softly, Winter Chaser. The spirits come. Wana hi pelo, they have come. Clothed in amber light, blurred by falling snow. Winter Chaser. So he died in July, but he sat up in his bed and said, Ma, wanki etro, le li la dayan wahi he. Look at this, it's snowing.
Oh, wow.
By the way, my first language was Dakota. I went to school when I was, went to boarding school when I was 4, and I only spoke Dakota. so I had to learn English. And I have a really good editor, Chuck Woodard. He corrects all my mistakes. Blue Water Creek is another one I wrote. You know, Blue Water was a place that our people went to, the Sichunku people went to. It's in Nebraska. And that was the first attack on us by General Harney. And we were completely unprepared when he attacked. During the night, during the early morning hours, they surrounded the camp, the hills all around the camp. And they, as soon as it started getting light, they attacked. And our people were completely unprepared. And Spotted Tail, our chief, the Sichunku chief, was there. Little Thunder was there. Little Thunder was 6'4" tall. And Harney was 6'2", and Spotted Tail was 6'3". And Harney would bully these native chiefs because he was so big. He was big and tall. He thought he could bully Spotted Tail and Little Thunder. And up comes these two warriors, 6'4" and 6'3", and he couldn't bully them. So this is Blue Water Creek. There are ghosts everywhere, leaving no tracks in the long shadowed dusk in this deceptively peaceful valley. Painted in soft shades of summer, teepee rings hold memories, soft murmuring of buffalo hunts, gathering of plant foods and berry picking. Spotted colts race, their tails flowing in the wind, a faint cry of a child with troubled dreams, and then a soft lullaby. The sleeping village lay quiet that morning before the landscape and hills roared with the madness of battle in the silent, empty space of Blue Water Creek. This one I wrote for a Hopi warrior woman. That was the only woman that was killed in Desert Storm, if you remember. I don't know if you've heard of Lori Piestawa, her name was. And I remember her father saying, "We believe that the spirits of our loved ones come back to us when it rains, when the snow and the rain, they bring them home." So I wrote this for her. Sing her journey song, her red roan prancing, she followed her warrior spirit to the blowing sand and storm. And bright night inferno went with earth thunder. Looking to the sky, she sang her warrior song. Tears glisten on cottonwood leaves and whispering sagebrush. Turtle shell rattles, sing her spirit song. Tears from each clan, the bird nation, hawk, dove, swallow, golden eagle, and mockingbird, circle in the wind, sing her earth songs, sing her rain songs, sing her warrior song. Dark and bright, night fires, brother wind comforts her, warrior spirit guides her away from the firestorm, through purple mountains and painted desert, to each mesa. No longer traveling alone, glowing cloud shadows, thunder songs welcome her home. Scattering cornmeal and pollen, warrior woman, now one gentle, swirling snow. Her father says she is home, she's home. The rain, the snow, the clouds have brought her home. Each spirit reflections welcome her home. Grandma's hands. I was raised by my grandmother. She had real soft, gentle hands. I used to play with the veins on her fingers, and now my grandkids do that to me. Grandma's hands for Grandma Julie. Her frail hands have covered mine bird-bone woman had life so dear, asked for so little, grateful for each small act of kindness. My hands held hers. I played with the veins on top of her hands, where each year etched its pattern. Skin like parched, dry riverbed, not withered nor gnarled, but soft and gentle. Pretty bird woman grew smaller and more frail. When I returned each summer, laugh lines grew, each gray hair more visible, fading with time. I saw those hands quilt, bead, and cook, hold a speckled blue coffee cup, pick berries in July, sun pressed down, easy little hurts, and cradle my cheeks. Brush the hair from my face, point to the evening star as she listened to summer sounds. When I left boarding school, her hands moved from her hair to her face and then finally to her eyes to say, wave goodbye. Dreams and memory, fragments drift through time, but there are no words for those images that keep her beside me always. Memories like wildflowers she picked and put in a mason jar are beautiful and vibrant. I remember how her outstretched hands welcomed me home. Pretty bird woman, her frail hands have become mine. Yeah, she never wept or cried when they took us because she didn't want us to be afraid. You know, she was trying to protect us. My grandmother always said, when you wake up in the morning, go out in the sun, go outside, take some deep breaths and clear your lungs and count your blessings. And so that's what got me through many tough times, that hope, counting my blessings in the morning, knowing that there were good things in my life. And so I wrote this: hope, give me a glimpse of what could be, not to ponder what might have been. Reveal the blush of dawn, overlook the thorns beneath the rose, welcome the glow of winter stars, to laugh and play in drifts of snow, kindle that gentle beauty in prayer when night and quiet come. Nightmares. Of course, you have to think of boarding school when they say nightmares. Yeah, we weren't allowed to speak our language. We had to speak English, or try to speak English. And those of us that didn't know English got the worst end of it. So, but I still talk my language. That's how ornery I am. I'm determined. I couldn't be Dakota otherwise. Nightmares. Sense the dread comes from a place so deep within, moments so real, filled with colorless faces, walls and fences, and habits of the mind. Family, love, and comfort deprived, shards of self-crushed, real darkness known, of federal mandate and Christian absolute reign. Drive the spear, kill the Indian, and save the child, endangered species or extinct, living in submission, in harsh Catholic rule. Recover, let go, collect the nectar of Lakota ceremonies, prayers not empty, not memorized, clarity within the scent of sage. Lakota's circle of sunlight transcends thistles and thorns, hiding behind the mask of kill the Indian and save the child. And I always wondered, when they took all of us kids, what it was like for a village with no children. I can't imagine not having my kids around me. The whole place, there was no children, because they took them all to boarding school. And then the boarding schools were just like prisons, just like detention centers. All doors were locked. We marched from one room to another, locked door. We marched through, locked behind us. Every morning we went to church at 6 o'clock, marched to church, marched back in the need. So, it was like a prison for people my age. In 1969, the Native American Religious Freedom Act was passed, and it started changing. So without children, I can't imagine a community without children. Children, like the sun, disappear into the night. Silence of laughter, absent of grass-stained jeans blowing in the wind. Little brown faces no longer rest on down pillows. Anguished mother weeps. Bewildered, distraught father, hardened over the year. Alcohol approaches like a friend to ease the pain in a community without children. Separation, assimilation, complete immersion, eclipse love of family, crucifix nailed to each wall, children on callous knees, hair hacked and discarded like garbage, identity ravaged and stripped bare, mutual disdain for one saw as a savage. The other oppression, separation, and panacea to kill the engine and save the child, killed in many the will to live, sadness turned to anger, alcohol approaches like a comforting friend, bitter survivors on the edge. Powerful memories call from home like the golden hue of sunrise. The meadowlark sings songs remembered, songs of the spirit. Sense of self reclaim to stand alone, spirit warrior, strong and defiant. This is who I am. This is who I am. Collection of memories. What time is it? I got about 5 minutes. Collection of memories. Collected memories, well-worn, caught in stories like fossils, spanning across time, ghosts of the past, subtle reflections of the past, present, and future. As a child, I lived in two worlds. One world, I faltered in its shadow, making me weep. Destination unknown in the windowless place. Keys jingled like stinging hailstones, pull at my mind. Suggests the Dakota world is broken. I am once again driven to that other world. My memories unravel feelings of ordinary silhouette of life, framed in stories, cumulative, unceasingly vital and simple, with the rise and fall of each dawn, layer after layer, signal a way for each generation. I choose memories of home, bright colors of fall scattered by the wind, like frost crystals sparkling in the moonlight, like the colors of the rainbow after a storm that soon fade into clouds, alive like flowers in the summer garden. My memories are filled with Lakota dreams my grandparents held for me. They return to me, grounded firm and deep like a force in nature. They bring me home to memories polished by the wind, to hold when silence is spoken. They bring me home. Okay. Thank you. Ty?
I got a question. In the writing process, when something gets down on paper. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, talk.
Okay, I got a question about your writing process. When you put something down on paper, how does it start? In what language, or is it a mix? So I'm sure is it like partly your native language, or do you already see it in English? Or do you have to
Okay.
translate?
Okay, I think in Lakota. I think that's why I can write all these feelings down. I think in Lakota, but I speak English too. So, yeah, sometimes my sentences are kind of jumbled up, my Lakota thought and my English thought. But I'm glad I have that. My whole community spoke Lakota. And so when we went home, that's all we heard. For 2.5 months, 3 months, we just heard Lakota. So it was great, just to feel that warmth, to feel that acceptance. And, it was being home.
I have a question. Okay.
I'm deaf.
Your poems are so soft and beautiful.
Thank you.
How do you keep from being angry and letting that anger come into your poems?
Okay. I was angry many years. I had a chip on my shoulder. And especially I was mostly angry at the Catholic Church for what they did to us. But eventually, after having children and wanting their happiness, I didn't want to project bitterness and anger, and I want them to have a good life. And I wanted them to live in a Lakota society and succeed in white culture too, and become educated. So all my kids have a college degree. So, I hope I succeeded. But I did have a chip on my shoulder for a long time. Any other questions?
Lydia, tell us about what you've done in the past in helping your culture in education, in your travels to other countries, and then what you're doing now to help
Okay.
preserve your language.
Okay, where do I start? I guess my grandparents, my great-grandparents spoke Lakota, Cheyenne, and English, and wrote in Lakota and English. And that was my great-grandparents. My grandparents spoke Lakota and English, wrote in Lakota and English, and read Lakota and English. And my dad the same way. So I was fortunate to be able to do that, And they valued education. They wanted us to be educated in the Lakota ways and mainstream ways for us to succeed, for us to have a life where we can go out and get a job, step into the white world, step back to be ourselves. So I ended up getting I have 2 cousins who are nurses, and they were my role models, and I wanted to be just like them. And so I signed up for nursing classes. Then they told us we had to attend an autopsy. That was the end of that idea. When we went into the autopsy room, I stood up against the wall, and I slowly sunk down to my I couldn't take that antiseptic smell, and just the thought of, an autopsy, I just couldn't do it. So then I went in. My brother was a counselor, and so I thought, I'll make a good counselor. But he'd come home with stories. He'd feel sad. He'd be depressed. Things that were happening to other people. He carried it with him, and I didn't want to do that. So then I became a teacher's aide, and I didn't know if I wanted to be in education. And the teacher I worked with was very impatient with the children. And I thought to myself, I can teach, and I can do better than her. And so I went into education, and I worked for 30 years in education and retired. And now I'm writing curriculum part-time. And glad, glad I have something to keep me busy. So I'm not just staying at home, stagnating, And I guess that's it. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.